Welcome back, everyone, to the next segment in our budget series. Right now, I'm joined by Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Director Dan Kramer. Dan, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we're talking about budgets this time of the year because, as you and I know, but maybe not the general public, we've been talking about our operational budget and our capital budget now for several months. And it's getting ready to be presented to the public and allow for public input. But Parks arguably is one of the biggest pieces of our budget and also a pretty good source of revenue because of all the recreational opportunities we have. So why don't you give us a general overview of what your department does?
Sure. So as the title, everybody thinks of parks right away, they think of our outdoor spaces. So Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, my department does encompass all of our public spaces that you'll go and visit. The Buchholz and the Piffner Parks of the world, Iverson Park, really those are the three that most people think of when they generate, or think about parks. But that goes all the way down to our neighborhood parks as well. Our park spaces, we have 30 of them, are all encompassed into our budget, as well as some of the properties that are used as park and recreation areas, but might not be designated parks. That's the Parks Division. We then move into our actual Recreation Division, which is what I always say is our spaces that are designed, like the Willett Arena, the Donald Copps Municipal Pool, the band shell, the different lodges that we have. Those are the things that we put on for actual quality of life enjoyment within the community. We also do programming within the Recreation Division, which is things like Learn to Skate. And then we move into our third kind of leg or division of the department, which is Forestry. And Forestry is all of the things that are, we always say, living and green along the street. So it's not only trees, but it's our landscaping, our planting. It's really anything related to plants and turf grass, athletic fields. That's what our Forestry Division is charged with overseeing. So all in all, that budget is a little over $2 million, which seems like a really large number when you look at it. But as you start diving in and breaking through it, it really is separated into really three main components, which is why we're made up of the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry.
Perfect. Well, and there's other things that people may not immediately associate with Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. The Riverfront Arts Center and snow removal. I mean, you're in charge of snow removal as well as cutting the grass in the summertime. Let's go a little bit deeper into each of those segments. What are some of the things that the Parks Department or Parks Division is responsible for doing? Where do we spend that money?
Yeah, so you just hit some of the biggest ones right away. So lawn mowing is one of our largest tasks that we do. With over 700 acres of parkland, while we don't mow at all, a lot of our parks are manicured, is what we say, meaning that we have them a regular mowing schedule and trimming schedule. In addition to that, trash is a big piece of the job for the parks crew. So when you go and visit the parks, you see the receptacles throughout the locations. We have to go multiple times a week and make sure that we're removing any of the refuse and garbage collection in those locations. The next really big task that we have is cleaning. So we rent a lot of facilities, as well as we have numerous things that are not rentable, but they're used by thousands of visitors a year. So every day we're going in trying to keep our restrooms clean and our public spaces for trails picked up so people can use them. So the Parks Division is really responsible for not only keeping things safe, so they're trying to work on them mechanically and make sure things are still working, but they mow the grass, they manicure the properties, keep the things open for the public. We're really always inspecting, maintaining, and trying to do some of that maintenance up front versus trying to defer it for later on. As the calendars change, we do move into different tasks. So special event season, my department, or the Parks Department, is heavily involved with all of the setup. So if you need barricades, or if you need fencing, or if you need a facility set up for electricity usage, marking utilities in the private properties, we do a lot of that for all of those main areas that hold gatherings for special events. We're also kind of the pro because we run Riverfront Rendezvous, that when people are asking questions for setting up these events, the crew will help a lot with providing some of the input of how we do things for our big event. When it does get to wintertime, we are in charge of almost all of the sidewalks within the city that are owned on public property. We do partner with the Public Works Department for a few different locations. For example, they do the downtown area, but if it's in front of a park or if it's in front of a lot of the city buildings, that's the Parks Department that's going through. And it's because our lawnmowers actually double as snow removal equipment. We take off the decks and we put on snow blowers or snow brooms, and those are used for those locations. As we transition to snow season, we actually have a full offering for the Parks Division of outdoor recreation spaces. So our parks crew is also who makes all of the ice rinks out downtown or outside in different park locations. They also maintain the winter sports area. So if you go tobogganing or if you go sledding in Iverson Park, that's the Parks Division themselves that does that. So while it's parks, there's so many more things that fit underneath it, and those are really the biggest things that the public enjoys from the Parks Division. And
parks is really a passion of mine. As you know, we've been working really hard on that 10-minute walk to a park initiative, meaning that no resident in the city of Stevens Point should have more than a 10-minute walk to a city park. And we're making progress all the time with that. One thing I wanted to talk about, because I get questioned about it all the time, is you mentioned manicuring the properties. We don't do that everywhere.
No.
We have certain areas that are heavily used that are manicured, they're mowed, and maintained because they're common public spaces that people use for picnics or yoga. I've seen all sorts of things in parks like Buchholz and Piffner and Iverson. But we also have a lot of areas that are, I don't want to say unmanicured, but left more natural and maintained as such. Talk a little bit about the number of pollinator gardens we have and prairie grasses and things like that.
Yeah, no, we've really worked hard with a number of partners within the community. The Central Wisconsin Wild Ones is one of them. The North Central Conservancy Trust is another one. But we have installed pollinator areas in multiple locations. So along Patch Street was one of the first ones. If you go just on the south side of Iverson Park, we just put one in a Mead Park a few years ago as well. And then a large expansion of the pollinator areas happened over the last 2 years. One in Kosikoski Park, which is right underneath a telephone line or a high voltage line, that while it was a park space and there was a trail, it really lent itself to be an area that we could leave for pollinators and having different species and wildlife in there versus trying to mow and manicure like we talked about. And the most recent one is along the riverfront on the north side between Buchholz and Piffner Park. That was a partnership with the Central Wisconsin Wild Ones, and there's a couple hundred feet of shoreline where we actually restored that to pollinator plants. So we do look at locations where we can either let, local initiatives like No Mow May lent itself to allowing us to try out different areas where we let some grass grow that we used to mow. And these pollinator initiatives have really been supported by the community, and they've been really effective, as well as they offer some diversity to habitat. And along the shoreline, they're offering some deep root systems, which also helps with some shoreline erosion. So we're able to balance the manicured look, which some people really like. We have some of those people in our community who love that real clean, manicured lawn mowing golf course kind of look. But we also have a number of areas that we're really sensitive to the environment across the whole park system, but those especially with the pollinator areas.
Yeah, and that works good because we do have 26,000 people here in the city. Some like one thing, some like another, which speaks to the diversity of the parks themselves. I mean, we have very heavily athleticized parks where Gerke Stadium and the football field, community stadium, the hockey rinks, tennis courts, things like that. But more natural areas too, like Kosikoski is a good one. If you want to sit and just read in quiet, or a bird watch, or maybe some fishing. So we cover that whole gamut, and I think the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department does a fabulous job trying to make sure that there's something for everyone. And speaking of something for everyone, recreational opportunities. So all of the things that we may not organize, but we provide services for organized types of events. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we do have basically every sport is covered in some capacity from an organizational standpoint. So the Park, Recreation, and Forestry Department and the Recreation Division specifically works heavily with the youth baseballs of the world, the youth softball, tennis, to pickleball, to all the different various athletics. And how it really works in the city of Stevens Point is we're really tasked with prepping a lot of the facilities, and then these organizations who are basically another partner of ours, they actually offer and organize a lot of those athletics. It allows us to have a good relationship where when we're doing upgrades to facilities, they're able to help us and partner to cost share some of those things, and we're able to offer a really diverse recreational offering without, for example, having a huge recreation staff specifically for it. In addition to those athletic activities, though, we do a number of enrichment things too. The Riverfront Arts Center, for example, was mentioned. The City of Stevens Point, and within my budget, does have a part-time person that works 20 hours a week at the Riverfront Arts Center, and we offer a full calendar of different arts exhibits that go on down there that are themed around the calendar. So we have a rich arts and culture in our community, and we do a really good job, and the city's been really supportive of building on that and offering that. The gallery is kind of a free space for all, so we do different jury calls and try to offer an opportunity to, we have university students that enter into that, we have high school students that enter into it, all the way up to senior age individuals that are part of that arts exhibit, depending upon the theme. Then you can also look into places like the KB Willett Arena. Our recreation division organizes learn to skate programs. One of the most important things for kids to learn, I think, is how to swim and how to skate. we do have those opportunities at the KB Willett Arena with ice skating. And then when you transition out during the warm months, we do have the Dental Cops Municipal Pool, which also offers a swimming opportunity within the community. So the Recreation Division, we try to have enough going on throughout the entire year. And then in areas where we might not organize the activity, we have partners that do, that we try to help with the spaces for them to run those activities.
So no ice skating rink at the municipal pool during the winter?
No, that one we, unfortunately with the plumbing pipes, we have to winterize that.
Oh yeah, I suppose there's that. But we do have, this, you mentioned the skating rinks. We create them as time and weather permit, and on any given year, we'll have 5 or 6 different rinks around town. Most recently added was the one downtown, which has been a huge success. And we partnered with the Downtown Business Alliance for installing that and cost sharing that. You hit the nail on the head though, because even though you have a pretty large segment of our taxpayer budget, if it weren't for these groups, the disc golfers and the skateboarders, the youth athletics, we wouldn't have half of the opportunities we do, because they are passionate about their activities, their sport. Prime water anglers, for example, all the fishing docks and piers and redoing the boat landings, that was all volunteers. The disc golf courses that we have, we've got what, 4 different areas of disc golf in the city. Randy Shukar used to be real big in that, and I know that other people have helped him out. John Pearson with the skate park, and I heard they're expanding. So let's talk, before we get to what we're going to be doing, let's talk about that last piece of your name, your title, and forestry. We've got more than a few trees in the city, being Tree City USA for over 30 years now. Talk about Forestry Division.
Yeah, so we're really fortunate at Stevens Point. Number one, we have the best forestry division in the entire state of Wisconsin. And they have some awesome resources at their disposal with the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point here in the community, Mid-State Technical College. We have a really great training program in which we have the college students bring some fresh new ideas to our division. But Todd Ernster, Paul Zeman, and Jonathan in that division really, they know it so well. So we have over 7,500 trees that are in the city street boulevards that they're tasked with keeping healthy. So the calendar of events, a lot of times people think of, cutting wood when they think about forestry. Well, the truth is we start with planting of that tree. So when we put boulevard trees in, typically we're planting in the spring or the fall. They're tasked with picking out the correct tree for the correct location. After we plant that tree, we actually follow along to make sure we water it through establishment for the first 2 years. And then we do what's called training pruning. So that crew will actually go through and they'll prune the small branches for up to 10 years after that tree is planted. And what it allows is the tree to grow with the proper form, and that saves big dollars of cutting large trees that have deformities when they're older. So when you go down the city streets and you look at some of these big, beautiful trees that have, that are 50, 60, 80, 100 years old, there's been a ton of care that's gone into with our really skilled staff as part of that. In addition to that, the division is always looking at the other parts of how we set up for it. So we have tree inventories. So we're monitoring the tree's health as it grows. So we're checking size, we're checking condition, we're looking for disease or for healthiness. And that tree inventory is what's used for a lot of our data analytics as well. So how many of each type of tree are we planting? Are we diverse enough that if a disease comes through, like emerald ash borer or Dutch elm disease, that we're not wiping out the entire tree canopy? So we're always trying to plant a variety of what we're putting along the boulevard. Things that the Forestry Division do that not necessarily related to trees, they're in charge of a lot of our greenscape and turf. So for example, in an athletic field, we have to do things like aerate, and we have to go through and dethatch. We have to make sure that we're putting enough grass seed in and reseeding and overseeding. They're in charge of all those things for the whole park system wide. So when you go in and see some of these beautiful green areas, we do a really good job trying to proactively treat the ground with aeration, proper overseeding, limiting traffic, so that we don't have to rely on as much chemical. And our forestry division is very active about that to make sure that our proper practices are letting that green turf areas establish before having to go to a lot of that chemical. In addition to that, they're in charge of things like the pollinator areas that we talked about earlier, and then they go through and they partner a lot for different classes with the universities to do things like tree planting, tree removals. They are also in charge of some private property monitoring. So when we do have things like disease come through the community, you'll see the forestry division going around looking for trees that might have oak wilt or emerald ash borer, and they're also tasked with marking those trees to make sure that the private property owner removes them so that they don't infect the rest of the city or cause problems for their neighbors. So forestry division is very busy with all of those things to take care of, but they really do a tremendous job.
It sure is. No, and one thing you mentioned with talking about private trees and taking care of those, most people don't realize this, but having a forester and an arborist on staff, that's available to the public for advice. So if there's a tree in your yard, you're not quite sure if it's healthy enough or not, you can call Todd, and he'll come out there and take a look at it. We don't maintain or do any work on private property, but we certainly can give you advice if you're maybe looking for species to plant, depending on what your goal is. Do you want privacy type plantings, or do you want shade, or maybe just something to attract wildlife? Todd can help you with all of that, and that's a service that is included in the taxes that we pay.
Yes, absolutely. He's a tremendous resource for trees, plantings, anything that is alive and growing. Definitely our forestry division stands at the ready for phone calls. And we do get quite a few calls about, hey, have you seen this or have you seen that? And we enjoy it too. It's the interactions with the public that we truly look forward to. So by all means, definitely call us if you have any questions related to your trees, your landscape beds, pollinator plants, anything that we can help with.
Great. So let's take a few minutes and talk about projects that are up and coming. We're about to approve the 2022 capital budget and the operating budget. We've got a lot of parks projects on there, including maintaining some of the things we have and some new things, with Emerson Park or rehabbing Buchelt. Talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, so a couple of the really big ones that are going to catch people's attention right off the bat is right now there's the playgrounds in for Iverson Park. So our community parks, the reason they're called community parks is because of their size as well as their draw. So Iverson Park is one of our community parks. As we know, it draws from the region, not just the whole community. But there's a large playground when you come in on I call it the north side playground, which is close to the asphalt parking lot. That playground is in the budget to be completely removed and replaced. It's over 30 years old and it's to the end of its useful life. And the new playground is going to follow our new accessibility standards like we do with all of the playgrounds. So most recently, Buchelt Park just received one, but we will start from the parking lot and imagine that if someone had a mobility impairment, we put accessible walkways into that playground. We also wrap the play surface with concrete walkways so that you can access the whole thing all the way around. The playground will be larger in scale, so our community playgrounds, we've now been putting some more money into them so we can have a larger play space because there's a lot more children and families that use them. If you go to a neighborhood park, there's less of a draw. So that playground right now is over $100,000 that we'll be putting into it, but it'll be a huge, tremendous asset when it's done because it's one of the most used playgrounds. So that's one project that's going to be first and foremost. From there, we're also moving into a correction of some erosion that we have in Kosciuszko Park. So sometimes maybe a little less attractive to the park user of amenities, but very important is definitely making sure we shore up our shoreline. So 25 or 30 years ago, there was a wood retaining wall that was put in Kosciuszko Park along McDill Pond, and that area is starting to fail. So we're at a point now where there's some money put in where we can restore that shoreline, protect the environment, but also keep that access to the water, which is a big area that people like to go fishing or they like to go swimming. Some boats will go down and they'll also park there. So that's in the budget as well for next year. Some other things that'll be going on is we're due for a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan update, and that's a mouthful when you say it. People say, what does that mean? It's really our roadmap for what happens in the park system. So we inventory all our current park amenities, our park property, and all the things that we are currently managing, and we kind of set the framework for what's going to happen over the next 5 to 8 to 10 years. And it sets us up for grant funding. So any Department of Natural Resources grants through the state of Wisconsin, by completing this comprehensive outdoor recreation plan update, we're able to then apply for those grants. And we've got a couple large projects that are fundraising currently, the Friends of Emerson Park for Emerson Park, as well as the Friends of the Plover River Crossing for a trail project that we hope to maybe get some grant funding by having that update done. So that's a document that'll be updated. One of the most visible projects, though, and I guess I saved it for a little bit further into this talk, is the update of some pickleball courts. So right now we have no pickleball courts that are designated in the community, and really in this kind of region unless you get to a neighboring community. So we've been working with a couple groups and getting some ideas, and where we've landed is that the two right now tennis courts in Mead Park are going to be completely restriped and relined, and it'll be resurfaced, and we're going to make that a 6 dedicated pickleball court complex. The reason for it is that will allow pickleball players to go down under a lit facility so they can play in the evening, and we don't have to install all the new infrastructure that we would have to if we had to build a brand new complex. Last year, we were able to update the Gerke tennis courts, so now the tennis players have a brand new tennis court facility in the community. This will be a designated pickleball court facility. With the mayor's support, your support has been fantastic to see that project take shape. We hope to have that done in the spring of 2022.
Yeah, that'll be really nice. And, people don't often think about those natural spaces costing money, but they do. So it's important that people understand what our Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department does and the value that they get for their money and the countless volunteer hours that go into making our public spaces as top-notch as they are. So I want to thank you, Dan, for joining us. Hopefully you know a little bit more about where your tax dollars are going, and maybe to soften the blow before you pay your taxes, take a walk through a park or something, and we'll see you next time.